Okay, now we're starting Masechta Dmai, which is the third Masechta in Seder Run. So Dmai, again, is the food of Am Ha'aretz, so we're not sure if he took off Meiser or not. Truma, we know he for sure took off. So two questions really that we have to address as starting this Masechta is, number one, why does this Masechta come in at this point in Seder Run? And then, again, to clarify and to be mavar what exactly is Dmai and what we're going to learn about in this Masechta. So the first question really is, because there are many Matnas Haniyim and many other Hilchis Roim, that it'd just be interesting to note that Dmai comes right after Peah, and Meiser and Meiser Sheni, which is the Masechtas that actually deal with the Chiyuv of Meiser and the Halachas of how to take off Meiser, come mamish towards the end of Seder Roim Mashein Kain Dmai, which was only Xeris Chachamim later on a suffix that's mentioned earlier. So Kotzav Rambam v'Seder Achar Peah Dmai, the reason for the Seder of this Masechta over here, B'shvil sheyesh bo la'aniyim schus k'may sheyesh lam b'Peah. The interesting idea that when it comes to Dmai, so aniyim are allowed to be zoich in Dmai, because if they need to eat it, so then they're allowed to eat it. So they have a schus in Dmai, just like they have a schus in Peah. V'chein omer machilan asa aniyim Dmai. The Mishnah says later on that you're allowed to feed aniyim Dmai. You don't have to take off ma'aser from that. Was steht in Rambam, and the Malach Shleimer brings this Rambam, and he says v'oidner loymar the mishum the parak basra the Peah, in the last parak of Peah Tanina we learned in the Mishnah Ben Levi neman la'olam. Ben Levi is always neman delay nechshad al trumas meiser ani. He's not nechshad on trumas meiser ani ki hechad Yisrael nechshad al truma g'daylo. While Levi is never nechshad on trumas meiser ani, the same way a Yisrael is not suspect on truma g'daylo. The ein behem safek Dmai. So Ro Achshav Lismech Masechta Dmai Achareho, therefore Masechta Dmai comes right after Peah. Hoil Shehuchar Kvar Lizkar Din Amonus Haben Levi V'Aniyim. There's a lot of Dinei Nemonus that we're going to be learning about in this Masechta. It's more than just Meiser versus not Meiser, or Truma versus Tevel. It's more about who we trust and how we trust, and in certain cases we trust this one, in certain cases we don't trust this one. V'chein Matzasi Achakach Shapir Shkein Harash Sirilu. And as they state that's the pshat in where this Masechta comes in. The Torah Yisrael says that Dmai hu tvua shel Am Ha'aretz, Dmai is the food of Am Ha'aretz, Nutrikin Dmai, what is this? Or Salam Ramazah, Me'usar Eloi, is this Me'usar or not? Was Meister taken over this or not? Then he the Rev Am Ha'aretz Masrinheim, V'lei Kaim Lan Kirmeir D'Chayish L'Miyuta. It's true that Rav Am Ha'aretz take off Meiser. We don't hold like Rameir that's Cheshish L'Miyuta. Hacha da ha'pers mitchilos ha'mecheskas iser tevel hoyu. But over here, the Perus started off with a cheskas iser of tevel. V'yikanami miyut shchiach te'en ma'asrin, and there's also a small miyut that's very common that they don't take off Meiser. So gam Rabbon and Moidu smoich miyut the shchiach l'chazaka midavrei seifrim lahachmir. So there's makom to be machmir over here. Okay, so that's a little bit of us. What the Mefarshim Mishnayos learned. During the period of the second Beis Hamikdash, it was discovered that many of the Amei Ha'aretz did not properly take off Meiser. So to deal with this problem, the Kohen Gadol at that time, was Yechanan Kohen Gadol, made a gzeira of Dmai to require Meiser of produce bought or received from such people. This is what the Masechta is going to talk about. The name Dmai refers to the produce, whether it's grain, fruits, or vegetables, of an Am Ha'aretz. The name is a contraction of the Aramaic words Domai. What is this? Referring to the uncertainty as whether it was fully Gimmeisert or not. Another explanation of the word Demai is that it's related to the word Dema, which is a mixture. The letters Aleph and Ayin are many times interchangeable, referring to the doubt that has become mixed into this produce. Some say that the term is related to Dimyan, appearance, because Demai appears in some ways to be Meisert and in others to be non-Meisert. There are many other Pirushim said as to what the Mai might be. To understand the discussions of this Masechta, it's first necessary to understand what's the mitzvahs of Trumas HaMeiser Midiraisa. So we're going to give a short Hakdama to the concepts of Truma and Meiser. Once produce has been harvested and processed to a certain stage of finishing, it becomes classified as Tevel. Tevel is a contraction of the words Tavloi. It's not good, it's not suitable for consumption yet until Truma was taken off. And it may not be eaten by Min HaTorah until Truma and Meisers have been designated and separated. Someone who has eaten Tevel is Mechuyev Misa B'dei Shomayim and Malkus. According to the Rambam and the Ravid, the Misa B'dei Shemayim applies only to produce that is tevel with respect to Truma or Trumas Meiser. However, according to Rashi and Tosfos and Yevamos on Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph, even if everything has been separated except for Meiser Sheni or even Meiser Ani, there is still a chiyuv of, there's still an einish of Misa B'dei Shemayim. Tevel is permitted, is mutar b'hanno, but it may not be used in ways that destroy it, like maybe using it for candlelight. Midrabanan, tevel may not be sold or given as a gift because the concern that a person who's receiving it may eat it without taking off truma. So what are the meisers? There's four basic concepts that we have. There's five basic things that we have to know. There's truma, meiser rishon, trumas meiser, meiser sheni, and meiser ani. Truma, or truma gedayla, is a small portion of the crop, either a 40th, or a 50th, or a 60th, that must be given to a kohen. Truma may be eaten only by kohanim and their families and their avodim, and it's forbidden to a zor, to a non-kohen. It's considered kodesh and must be eaten b'tara. This is truma or truma gedayla. Meiser rishon is 1/10 of the produce that remains after the truma has been taken. It's given to a Levi, who then must give 1/10 of that to a kohen, which is trumas meiser, which is the next thing. Once the balabayas takes off meiser, the remaining meiser rishon, once the Levi takes off meiser, the meiser rishon has no kedusha and may be eaten by anyone. Although there is a machlekes tanoim about this, we paskin that meiser has no kedusha. The third one is trumas meiser. The meiser rishon given to a Levi must also have meiser taken off from. The Levi separates 10% of it to a kohen. This meiser is known as trumas meiser or meiser min ha-meiser. Like trumas meiser is permitted only to kohanim and to their families. Meiser sheni. This consists of 1/10 of the produce remaining after meiser rishon is taken off. It's taken in the first, second, fourth, and fifth year of a 7-year Shemitah cycle, and it's brought to Yerushalayim to be eaten. If the owner does not wish to take the produce to Yerushalayim, it can be paid onto kesef, onto money. The money takes on the kedusha as meiser, and the produce becomes chulin and may be eaten anywhere. The money is then brought to Yerushalayim and used there to purchase food. The food takes over the kedusha's meiser from the money and must be eaten in Yerushalayim. The fifth one is Meiser Ani. In the third and the 6th years of the Shemitah cycle, Meiser Sheni is replaced by Meiser Ani, which is distributed to the poor. Meiser Ani has no kedusha and may be eaten by anybody because it's matan saniyah. So there are two parts of taking off Meiser. A person must declare a certain part of the produce to be Meiser, Kriyas Shem, which means to designate it, and doing the actual Meiser of the Hafrasha, separation. Taking out the meiser of the rest of the produce to give it to the kohen, the Levi, or to the ani, or to bring it to Yerushalayim. These two actions can be done together by taking the right amount out of the tevel and declaring it to be meiser, or separately by first being Kriyas Shem, designating it, and in a certain part of the pile, and then being mafresh it later. Once the meiser has been designated, the rest of the produce is considered mesukin in regards to that meiser, even if you didn't do hafrasha yet. Okay, that's the basic background of Trumas and Meisers. So now let's talk a little bit about Dmai. The Rabbanan were geyser that although the Amei Haaretz were generally observant, they cannot be relied upon to properly take Meiser of their produce as required min ha-Torah. Therefore, anyone who receives produce from Amei Haaretz must separate its Meiser before eating it, even if the Amei Haaretz states clearly that his produce Meiser was taken off, he's not Nema. However, the Chachamim were makel in certain cases and did trust him in a few scenarios, as we'll see in Parak Dalet. During the Tekufa, the second Beis Hamikdash, Yochanan Kohen Gadol sent shluchim around Eretz Yisrael to observe how people were taking off Meiser. So it's a question of who this Yochanan Kohen Gadol was. The Meiri and the Sefer Yuchsin say that he was the father of Matasyahu Kohen Gadol Chashmonaih Yehuanov, and some say that the Rambam holds like this also. Others, however, maintain that this is Yochanan Kohen Gadol, the one that's mentioned in Brachos and Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph, who became a Tzeduki towards the end of his 80-year tenure as Kohen Gadol. The latter Yochanan Kohen Gadol was a grandson of Matzio Chashmonaih. So they reported that although the Amei Haaretz were careful to separate Truma from their crops, a significant minority of them did not separate other meisers. So Midai Raisa, someone who bought produce on such people, did not have to take off the meiser. Did not have to take off meiser because they could rely on Rav, on a majority that the Amei Haaretz who they bought it from was one of the majority of Amei Haaretz who did take off meiser properly. Nevertheless, because of the severity of tevel, because as we mentioned earlier, there's a chiv misa b'dei shamayim. So Yochanan Kohen Gadol and his bezdin made a gzeira that we may not rely on the majority who take off meiser, but must separate meiser from all produce that we buy from an Am Ha'aretz. So who's considered Am Ha'aretz? What's Machlekes Tanoim? So after they made the takon of Dmai, every person, with the exception of a recognized Talmid Chacham, a chaver, is assumed to be an Am Ha'aretz until he undergoes a formal procedure to establish that he is somebody who can be trusted regarding Meiser. The procedure consists of making a declaration before Bezdin that he is prepared to follow all the halachas of Meiseris and bring Eidim that have observed him living up to these requirements and certain other pratim. Once a person undertakes this, he's known as a nemon, a trusted person, and any produce purchased from him is not to be considered Dmai. Okay. Now let's talk about a little bit of how we do Dmai. What do we do with Dmai? So the Gzeira of Dmai does not require a person to designate Truma, since you can assume that Truma was fulfilled by the Am Ha'aretz. Am Ha'aretz were more careful with Truma because eating tevel from Truma that you weren't mafresh is a chiv of misa b'dei shumayim. Although the same applies to tevel, which Trumas Meiser has not been separated from, Am Ha'aretz mistakenly assumed that Trumas Meiser does not take effect until Meiser Rishon has been designated. Since they did not separate Meiser Rishon, they didn't think they needed to worry about Trumas Meiser either. Others learned that they were willing to separate Truma because it was a deraisa. To be mekayim the mitzvah deraisa of Truma, you can use even one kernel, but they were unwilling to do this with Meiseris, which were 10%, which was a lot more, so they didn't want to do that. So all other Meiseris must be designated for Dmai. So it's a shtickle machlekes about what the story is with Dmai. Some say that the Chacham were mesaken Dmai misafik, because midaraisa you could be samech and Am Ha'aretz. Midaraisa there's a rev you could be samech and Am Ha'aretz to do take off Meiser. So Chacham were mesaken that we may not follow the roiv. Accordingly, we must take of Meiser misafik. However, according to others, the chiyuv is not misafik. The safik is why the Chacham made the gzeira. Once the Chacham made the gzeira, so the produce is considered tevel midrabanan. There are a few kulas in regard to Dmai. So as will be explained throughout the Masechta, Yochanan Kohen Gadol did not wish that the Meiser of Dmai should be overly difficult or expensive. The Gzeira he enacted therefore allows the owner to keep almost all of the Meiser for himself, while still removing any tevel status from the produce. Many Meisers only need to be designated verbally, and they would not need to be separated and given away, and the procedure would be as follows. A tenth of the Dmai produce is separated as Meiser Rishon and Trumas Meiser is then separated from it. While regular Meiser Rishon is given to a Levi, Meiser Rishon of Dmai remains property of the owner. This is because Meiser Rishon has no Kedusha. Once Trumas Meiser has been separated from it, it may be eaten by even non-Leviim. The only right a Levi has to it is that the Torah made Meiser Rishon a gift to the Leviim. This is merely mammon. But in the case of Dmai, it's not clear that the Levi has this schus mammon, because it's possible that the Meiser Rishon separated from it did not need to be separated from it altogether, since the Am Ha'aretz may have been mafresh Meiser ready to begin with. Since it's a suffix, the owner can keep it and eat it himself, in keeping with the klal gadol b'mammonis that hamoitzi mechaber levaraya, the one who wishes to take from someone else must bring proof before he can collect it. Trumas Meiser, however, is given to a kohen, since it's also for a non-kohen to eat it. Secondly, after separating Trumas Meiser, a person may take a tenth of what remains as Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani, depending on which year it is in the Shemitah cycle. Meiser Sheni shel Dmai, like regular Meiser Sheni, must be taken to Yerushalayim and eaten there, or you have to be pointed onto money, and you take that money to Yerushalayim and you spend the money on food that's eaten over there. Meiser Ani of Dmai is treated like Meiser Rishon of Dmai, and needs only to be designated, but it's then kept by the owner. It does not need to be given to a poor person. Since it has no Kedusha, it may be eaten by anybody. The Aniyim merely have a monetary claim on it to have this chus mammon. Since they can't prove that Meiser Ani was really needed, because maybe the Am Ha'aretz took off Meiser already, the owner may keep it and eat it himself, because again, it's the problem of Hamoitzi Mechal very Olavaraya. So, come to us that the only Meiser that must be given away from the Mai is Trumas Meiser, which boils down to just 1% of the crop, and all other Meisers remain property of the owner. Since the Chiv of Demai is only Midrabanon, the Rabbanon were mekel in many cases, as mentioned before. Today, Bizman Hazeh, there's a majority of Am Ha'aretz that take off. There's no longer the majority that Am Ha'aretz take of Meiser and Truma also. Accordingly, someone who purchases produce from Am Ha'aretz today that's not under supervision must separate even Truma. Likewise, all kulas on Dmai, based as they are on the presumption that most Amei Oretz separate Maestros, are not applicable today, as they zok the Chazon Ish. Okay, with this we would start the Masechta.